Vanessa gave my dad an ultimatum on my 15th birthday. Your daughter or your wife. He chose her. Today, my net worth is $92 million. I didn't hear those words from him directly at first. I overheard them, sharp and final, drifting through the thin walls of our house. Vanessa's voice was calm, almost bored, as if she were talking about a piece of furniture she didn't like. Frank, she goes tonight. Or I do. I sat frozen on my bed, hugging my knees, listening for his answer. My heart begged him to defend me, to remind her that I was his child, his only daughter. Instead, I heard the heavy sigh, the scrape of hangers, the dull thud of drawers being emptied. That sound crushed me harder than any words could. When he finally came into my room, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just bent down, picked up my clothes, and shoved them into black trash bags. My notebooks, my quilt, even the sneakers I saved up for, stuffed and tied like garbage. I wanted to scream, to make him look at me, but my throat locked tight. All I could do was press my mother's necklace into my palm until it left marks. Vanessa stood in the doorway, arms crossed, lips curved in the faintest smile. She watched like she was waiting for a delivery to be finished. No shame, no guilt, just satisfaction. By midnight, I was outside on the curb. The porch light clicked off behind me. The bags sat at my feet like proof that I no longer belonged anywhere. The street was quiet except for the hum of a street lamp overhead. I shivered and pulled my jacket tight, though it didn't help. That was the moment it hit me. I was alone. No home, no plan, not even $1 in my pocket. Just me, the bags, and the necklace hanging against my chest. I remember whispering into the dark, "Happy birthday" to me. My voice broke halfway through, and the words were swallowed by the wind. The streetlight flickered once, then steadied. I lifted my eyes, staring down the long stretch of empty road. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even know how I'd make it to morning. But I knew I couldn't stay there, waiting for a father who had already chosen someone else. So I picked up one bag, slung it over my shoulder, and took the first step into the night. When I left the house that night with the trash bags at my feet, the porch light snapped off, and the silence was so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. My legs moved without a plan, carrying me farther and farther away from the only home I had ever known. The streets changed one block into another, but I kept walking. I ended up at a bus stop. I sat on the cold bench, clutching my backpack to my chest while buses pulled in and out. Each time the doors hissed open, I thought about climbing on. But I had no ticket, no money, and nowhere to go. What was the point of riding just to end up lost in some other corner of the city? So I stayed, watching the buses disappear into the night. Later, I wandered past a convenience store. Bright lights spilled onto the sidewalk, and behind the glass I saw rows of chips, bottles of juice, and sandwiches wrapped in plastic. My stomach twisted. If I had a few dollars, I would have bought something small, anything. Instead, I just stood there staring until the security guard inside shot me a suspicious look. Heat rushed to my cheeks, and I turned away, pretending I hadn't been desperate. The city grew quieter as the hour slipped deeper into the night. My steps finally slowed when I reached an old church. A cross on the roof caught the glow of a streetlight, faint but steady. The front door stood cracked open, and from somewhere below I heard the muffled sounds of coughing, a soft murmur of voices, the rustle of blankets. A basement shelter. I hesitated on the steps, my hands tightening around the straps of my bag. It wasn't home. It would never be home. But it was a place with walls, warmth, maybe even safety. After a long breath, I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The basement smelled of bleach and old wood, the kind of smell that clung to your clothes and hair. The air was heavy, warm in patches where too many bodies crowded close, cold in the corners where the draft slipped through cracks in the foundation. Rows of thin mats stretched across the floor, each with a blanket folded at the end. Some people were already curled up, shoes tucked under their heads like pillows. A man near the door shifted restlessly, muttering in his sleep. Somewhere deeper in the room, a woman coughed, long and rattling. I stood there with my bag slung over my shoulder, not sure if I was allowed. A volunteer in a gray hoodie gave me a small nod. "Mat in the back's open," he whispered, pointing without much ceremony. His voice was low, like he'd said the same thing 1,000 times before. I walked down the row, careful not to step on anyone's blanket. Eyes followed me, some curious, some tired, some blank. I lowered myself onto the empty mat. It was thin, harder than the wooden floor of my room at home, but tonight it was more than I expected to have. I lay down, pulling my jacket tight, using my backpack as a pillow. The ceiling was low and lined with water stains, shapes that shifted in the dim light. I traced them with my eyes, pretending they were maps leading somewhere else. The sounds of the shelter closed in, snoring, coughing, the shuffling of feet as someone turned in their sleep. Every sound reminded me I was not alone, yet the loneliness pressed heavier than silence. I thought of my dad's voice, flat and certain. "It'll be easier this way." And Vanessa's smile, thin and sharp. My hand reached for the necklace under my shirt. The metal was cool against my skin, grounding me, reminding me I was still me, even here. I closed my fist around it and kept it there, as if letting go would make me vanish. Someone nearby whispered a prayer. Another person hummed a tune so faint it might have been just in my head. I breathed slowly, trying to match the rhythm, trying to disappear into the noise. Sleep came in short bursts, broken by shivers, by the slam of the basement door when the night volunteer left, by dreams where I was back on the curb under the buzzing streetlight. Each time I woke, the ache in my chest was there waiting. Still, the mat held me. The ceiling stayed above me. And for that night, at least, I had walls around me that kept the darkness outside. The basement lights flicked on before dawn, harsh and sudden. I blinked against the glare, my eyes stinging. A volunteer's voice moved softly through the rows of mats. Wake up call. 5 minutes. Let's go. Around me, people stirred. Blankets folded. Shoes slipped on. The air filled with the shuffle of tired bodies moving through routine. I pushed myself up slowly, the mat creaking under my weight. My backpack had been under my head all night. I checked it quickly, as if someone might have taken it, though nothing was missing. I splashed cold water on my face in the bathroom sink, the faucet squeaking each time it turned. The mirror above it was cracked, spiderweb lines distorting my reflection. I avoided my own eyes, focusing instead on straightening my jacket and pulling my hair back into a ponytail. Outside, the sky was still dark. The street lamps glowed yellow over the empty sidewalks, and the air was sharper than it had been the night before. I tucked my hands into my pockets and started walking, each step echoing in the quiet. The city felt like it belonged to someone else at that hour. A lone taxi passed, headlights sweeping over me. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and then faded. I kept my head down, watching the cracks in the sidewalk, the gum stains, the scattered trash. My stomach growled. The last thing I'd eaten was half a muffin a volunteer handed me before lights out. The thought of warm coffee, or even the greasy smell of eggs, was enough to push my legs faster. The neon sign of the diner came into view, flickering pink and blue against the gray sky. Diner's Edge. The windows glowed faintly, a promise of heat and light. I stood for a moment outside, breathing in the smell of frying bacon that leaked through the vents, letting it wrap around me like a blanket. Then I pulled the door open. A small bell jingled overhead, announcing me into the quiet room where another long shift waited. The bell over the door gave a tired jingle as I stepped into Diner's Edge. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of bacon grease and burned coffee, clinging to the walls and my jacket alike. The room was nearly empty, just a trucker hunched over a plate of eggs and a waitress yawning as she scribbled on her notepad. Chuck stood behind the counter, wiping at a spot on the chrome with a rag that looked dirtier than the counter itself. He barely looked up when he saw me. Clock says 4. You're late if you're late, early if you're here. Grab a rag. I nodded, no words needed. My throat still felt raw from the cold outside. I tied on the apron that smelled faintly of onions and grease, then started wiping down the tables. The rag was damp, leaving streaks on the formica, but it didn't matter. By 5, the diner was buzzing. Coffee pots hissed, the fryer popped, and plates clattered as I carried them to the sink. My arms ached, but I forced myself to keep pace with the waitresses who moved like they were born balancing trays. During a short lull, I slipped into a booth near the window with Chuck's old tablet. The screen was cracked at the corner, but the Wi-Fi worked if you held it just right. I scrolled aimlessly, half distracted by the hum of the diner. That's when the photos appeared, tagged on Vanessa's page. A beach in Hawaii, palm trees swaying. Vanessa in oversized sunglasses, her hair shining in the sun. My dad next to her, smiling wide, a drink in his hand with a ridiculous paper umbrella poking out of it. Both of them tanned, laughing, glowing. I stared until my stomach knotted. My father hadn't been able to keep me under his roof, but he could afford white sand beaches and oceanfront cocktails. The tablet slipped a little in my hands as I scrolled through photo after photo. Sunset dinners, boat rides, matching lays. Something sharp pressed against my ribs, but I couldn't stop looking. It felt like standing outside a glass window, watching two strangers live a life I'd never been meant for. Break's over, Chuck called, his voice pulling me back. I set the tablet down carefully, like it might burn me if I held it longer. My hands shook as I went back to wiping counters, the smell of fried food suddenly sour in my throat. Every time I carried a plate past the window, the glow of that beach lingered in my mind. It followed me into the sink, into the greasy steam, into every step until the morning crowd began to thin and the diner quieted again. But no matter how many plates I scrubbed, I couldn't wash those pictures away. It happened a few days later, just after the breakfast rush. The diner was packed that morning. Construction workers grabbing pancakes before their shift, a couple of nurses in scrubs nursing their third coffee, and one table of teenagers who treated the place like their living room. laughing too loud and leaving crumbs everywhere. Orders stacked up, the printer spitting tickets faster than the waitresses could grab them. Then suddenly the machine froze. The screen went blank, beeping angrily. One of the servers slapped it with her hand. Nothing. Not now, Chuck muttered, his face going red. He jabbed at the buttons, smacked the side, and cursed under his breath. The waitresses hovered, orders in hand, their patience slipping. Damn piece of junk, he growled. I stood nearby, rag in hand, watching. My pulse quickened. I knew what it felt like when everything jammed up, when you were stuck waiting on something you couldn't control. But this, I thought maybe I could. Can I try? The words left my mouth before I could think twice. Chuck turned on me, sweat beading on his forehead. You? Kid, this thing costs more than your life. Just let me see, I said, quieter this time. For a second I thought he'd tell me to shut up, but instead he threw his hands in the air. Fine. Knock yourself out. Can't make it worse. I slid behind the counter. The screen blinked in fits, frozen between two menus. I bent down, tracing wires with my fingers, pressing the restart button hidden underneath. Nothing changed. My heart thudded, and I heard a waitress groan behind me. But I kept going, cleared the cache, reset the drivers, updated the system buried 3 menus deep. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the screen flickered, went black, then lit up again. Order ready, the printer chirped, spitting out a fresh ticket. Another. The kitchen bell rang as cooks scrambled to catch up. The diner seemed to exhale all at once. The servers lunged for their slips, the noise of the room lifting again. Chuck just stood there, his mouth half open. Then he snorted, shaking his head. Well, I'll be damned. He reached into his pocket and shoved a bill into my hand. Don't say I never pay extra for miracles. His voice was gruff, but there was a flicker in his eyes that wasn't there before. He added, there's a pie in the back. Take it before it goes bad. I mumbled a thank you, tucking the bill into my apron. My fingers tingled where the paper touched them. That night in the shelter, I ate the pie straight from the box, sitting cross-legged on my mat. The other girls watched, wide-eyed, until I slid slices toward them too. Their laughter filled the basement, soft but real, echoing against the low ceiling. For a moment, the air didn't smell like bleach, and the walls didn't feel so heavy. It was the first time in weeks I felt something like light. The bell over the diner door jingled late one afternoon, just as the lunch rush was dying down. I was wiping crumbs from a booth, half dreaming about the extra 20 folded in my pocket from yesterday's miracle with the register. A man stepped inside, tall, sharp suit, the kind of watch that looked heavy on his wrist. He carried himself like he owned the place, though his eyes moved lazily across the room until they landed on me. He stopped, studied me, then his mouth curved into a knowing smirk. Well, if it isn't Emily Parker, he said, sliding into a booth without asking. His voice was smooth but carried a bite. I froze mid-wipe. Hardly anyone here even knew my last name. Do I know you? I asked, my voice tighter than I wanted. You don't, but I know your father. He leaned back, tapping his fingers on the table. Frank Parker. And Vanessa, my lovely sister. My throat went dry. I gripped the rag tighter, wishing my hands didn't shake. He chuckled when I didn't answer. Funny though, Frank told the whole family you were tucked away at a nice boarding school. Said you were thriving. His eyes swept over me, my stained apron, my scuffed shoes, the exhaustion written on my face. Guess he left out a few details. Heat rose in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I straightened, forced my voice steady. Coffee. His smile widened, like I'd given him exactly what he wanted. Black. No sugar. I turned toward the counter, every step heavy, his eyes burning into my back. Chuck poured the coffee without comment, sliding the pot toward me. His jaw was tight, but he didn't ask. When I set the cup in front of the man, he didn't touch it right away. He just leaned forward, lowering his voice. You know, family talk travels fast. People will want to know why Frank's little girl is bussing tables instead of boarding school. The rag was damp in my hand, dripping onto the floor. I forced myself to meet his eyes, though every nerve screamed to look away. Then let them wonder. For a beat, his smirk faltered. Then he laughed softly, shaking his head like I was some sort of amusing puzzle. He dropped a crisp bill on the table, untouched coffee steaming between us, and stood. As he walked out, the bell over the door jingled again, light and careless, like nothing had happened. But the weight of his words stayed behind, pressing down harder than any tray of plates I'd ever carried. The coding marathon was louder than I expected, a gymnasium filled with rows of folding tables and kids in hoodies who looked like they already belonged to another world. I sat up in the far corner, pulling my scratched laptop from its case like it was a fragile secret. My hands trembled as I logged in, but once the screen lit up, the noise around me blurred. I opened the Safe Haven prototype. The map was crude, the interface plain, but it worked. You could tap a city, see shelter beds, free meals, even a hotline number. It wasn't polished, but it was real. I told myself that was enough. Hours passed. Teams laughed, argued, scribbled on whiteboard. I sat alone, adjusting code until the buttons ran smoother, until the app stopped freezing. My back ached, my eyes burned, but when the app opened cleanly on the screen, my chest lifted like I could finally breathe. A shadow fell over my table. Who built this? I looked up. A man stood there, tall, maybe mid-30s, crisp suit in a room full of sneakers. His badge read Miles Adams, Venture Capital. His gaze was sharp, locked on my laptop. I did, I said, my voice thinner than I wanted. He leaned closer, scrolling through the app with quick, practiced fingers. Real-time shelter updates. Targeted at minors? I nodded, clutching the edge of the table. Teens mostly. Kids who don't know where to go. People like me. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Miles didn't laugh. He didn't smirk. He tapped the screen again, then looked at me. You coded this on your own? Yes. For a moment, the noise of the gym seemed to fade. Miles studied me with an expression I couldn't read, part calculation, part something else. Then he straightened, pulling a card from his pocket and sliding it across the table. Emily, right? He asked, glancing at the name tag pinned to my sweatshirt. Come see me after this. I want to talk about where this can go. I stared at the card, my fingers brushing over the raised letters of his name. For the first time since the night on the curb, I felt something flicker inside me that wasn't just survival. It felt like the start of something bigger. Miles moved fast. Within weeks, Safe Haven wasn't just my project. It was a company. He found the servers, the lawyers, the mentors. I still worked from my beat-up laptop at the library, but the app grew sharper every day, the map more accurate, the alerts faster. Then came the story. CNN ran a segment about the teen who turned homelessness into hope. My name flashed across the screen, my voice shaky but determined in the interview. Overnight, downloads spiked. Shelters called, nonprofits reached out. For the first time, I signed a lease, my own apartment in San Jose, tiny but mine. A bed, a desk, a door that locked from the inside. But success didn't come alone. One morning, scrolling through my feed, I froze. Vanessa's page, a photo of my app, cropped to hide my name with her caption. So proud of my stepdaughter's success. We always knew she'd do something amazing. Stepdaughter. My throat tightened. She had turned my survival into her brag, stealing the image of something she never touched. The comments beneath praised her as if she'd raised me. I slammed the laptop shut, but the bitterness clung. That night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I pressed play, and my father's voice filled the room, rough and hesitant. Emily, it's your dad. We need to discuss college funds. Call me back. College funds. The words made me laugh, sharp and humorless. He hadn't given me a bed, hadn't asked if I was alive. Now, with my name on the news, suddenly there were funds to discuss. I set the phone down on my desk, staring at it like it might burn through the wood. For the first time, I realized success hadn't freed me. It had dragged them back into my orbit. Safe Haven grew faster than anyone expected. It wasn't just beds and meals anymore. It became a lifeline. We added job training modules, mentorship programs, a way for teens to connect with employers willing to give them a chance. The downloads doubled, then tripled. Nonprofits wanted partnerships. Cities wanted contracts. My calendar filled with meetings I'd never imagined sitting in. When the buyout offer came, it didn't feel real. $43 million. I stared at the number on the contract, tracing the zeros with my eyes like they might vanish if I blinked too long. Signing it meant letting go of the thing I had built, but it also meant freedom to build more. I signed. With the money, I launched Parker Innovations, a company meant to design tools for people who lived at the edges, the forgotten, the discarded, the kids like me. It wasn't just business. It was revenge made useful. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Frank's childhood home had gone into foreclosure months earlier. The same walls he once bragged about, the same porch he used to sit on telling stories about his father's hard work. It was up for sale. I bought it in cash, not to live in, to gut it, rebuild it, and reopen it as a youth shelter. The ribbon-cutting photo made the local paper. Me standing in front of the house he lost, with kids who finally had a place to stay. Not long after, I noticed something strange. Vanessa's Instagram, once a flood of designer handbags and exotic vacations, went quiet. No more luxury shots, no glowing selfies under palm trees, just silence. It didn't take a genius to know what that meant. The life they'd chosen over me was unraveling, piece by piece. The glass walls of my office caught their reflection before I even looked up. Frank and Vanessa, standing stiff in the reception area, security hovering uncertainly behind them. They hadn't been invited. They hadn't been expected. But here they were, striding in as if they still had a claim. Vanessa was the first to speak, her voice breaking into rehearsed sobs. Emily, we didn't want to come like this, but your father, he's sick. Cancer. We don't know how long he has. She clutched his arm like she was steadying him, though Frank looked more uncomfortable than I let her words hang in the air, studying them both. The tears glistened, the handkerchief pressed dramatically to her cheek. I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up the remote on my desk and tapped a button. The large screen behind me flickered to life, security footage filling the glass wall. There she was, Vanessa, hours earlier, walking out of a Louis Vuitton boutique, shopping bag in hand, laughing into her phone. The time stamp glowed across the bottom. The silence in the room was sharp enough to cut. Vanessa's tears vanished like a switch had been flipped. "This is harassment," she snapped, her voice suddenly hard, but her hands tightened on Frank's sleeve. I didn't move, didn't smile. The footage played again, looping her lie over and over until even Frank's shoulders sagged. Finally, he cleared his throat, his voice low, broken, almost pleading. "We're still family." The words drifted toward me, but they didn't land. Family had been left in trash bags on the curb years ago. All that stood in front of me now were two ghosts trying to claw their way back into a house I had already burned down. The silence after Frank's words stretched thin, trembling like glass about to crack. I stood, crossed the office, and opened the storage cabinet by the window. Inside were two large black trash bags. I dragged them across the polished floor and set them down with a heavy thud in front of my desk. Neither of them spoke. Vanessa's eyes darted from the bags to me, confusion flickering into unease. I nudged them forward with my foot, letting the plastic crinkle and fold just the way it had that night years ago. My mind flicked back, 15 years old, standing on the curb at midnight, the same bags digging into my arms, stuffed with the only pieces of my life my father hadn't left behind. I could still feel the ache in my hands, the sting of tears on my face, the way the world had gone silent except for the sound of a car driving away. Now the bags sat between us again, but this time on my terms. Vanessa's breath hitched, her voice climbing higher. "What is this supposed to mean?" she demanded, though her face had already gone pale. I didn't answer. I just held her gaze, waiting. Her composure broke. She shoved the bags aside, her words spilling out like venom. "After everything we sacrificed for you, do you have any idea what we gave up? What I gave up for your father?" Her voice cracked, more rage than grief, her hands trembling as she slammed them onto the desk. Frank lowered his eyes. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend himself. He just stared at the bags as if he finally saw them for what they were. Proof of the night he chose her and left me behind. And I let the silence answer for me. The air in the office was heavy, every second stretching longer than it should. Vanessa's outburst still echoed against the glass walls, but I hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. Instead, I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a small black recorder. Its weight in my palm was familiar. I'd kept it all these years, not because I needed to prove anything to myself, but because I knew one day they would come back. I set it on the desk, press play. Vanessa's voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. "Frank, that brat goes today." Then came the pause, long enough to remember, long enough to hope. And then Frank's whisper, small, cowardly. "Okay." The sound cut through the office like a blade. Frank crumpled into the chair opposite me, his hands covering his face. His shoulders shook, not with strength, not with anger, but with the weight of everything he had buried. "Emily," he choked, his voice raw. I was weak. I didn't know what to do. "Please, please forgive me." The sight should have softened me, but it didn't. The boy inside me who used to wait for his approval was gone. All that was left was the girl on the curb, holding trash bags under a dark sky. Vanessa, though, didn't fold. Her face twisted, red with fury. "You little snake," she spat, lunging across the desk with sudden violence, her nails reaching for my face. Before she could touch me, security surged forward. Two guards caught her mid-swing, pulling her back as she kicked and cursed, her voice breaking into a feral scream. After everything we built." Frank didn't move to help her. He sat hollow, head in his hands, while Vanessa thrashed against the guards dragging her toward the door. I leaned back in my chair, the recorder still glowing faintly on the desk. The evidence was out in the open now. No lies, no performance, no way to twist it into another story. For the first time, they were the ones cornered, and I didn't have to raise my voice. The truth had already spoken louder than I ever could. The fall didn't take long. News travels fast when it's ugly, and their collapse was broadcast for anyone to see. One morning, TMZ ran a clip of a tow truck hauling away their white Mercedes, Vanessa shouting at the driver while neighbors filmed from their porches. The headline scrolled across the screen. X, Silicon Valley socialites lose everything. I watched the video once, then closed it. There was nothing satisfying about seeing them unravel. It was too small compared to the years they had stolen from me. My focus was elsewhere. With Parker Innovations thriving, I began channeling resources into something bigger than apps or profit. We funded more than 100 shelters across the county, each one equipped with beds, computers, and programs that gave kids a way forward. The same kids who used to sleep on sidewalks, who carried their lives in bags the way I once did, now had doors that opened. The project wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rewriting the ending, not just mine, but there's two, the ones who still had a chance to make it. On a quiet evening, I returned to the place where everything had broken. My old house, Frank's childhood home, the one I had bought and rebuilt. The porch light glowed softly, the paint fresh, the windows warm. A group of teens waited by the door, nervous and excited, clutching backpacks that looked heavier than they. I slid the key into the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. The smell of fresh wood and clean air spilled out. "Go on," I told them, stepping aside. As they filed past me, their laughter filling the space, I smiled, not at what I had lost, but at what I had finally created. Do you think I was right to close the door on my father and Vanessa after everything they put me through, or should I have given them another chance? I really want to know what you think. Leave me a comment with your thoughts. And if you'd like to hear more of my story, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next.